Welcome to another episode of Cocktails and Curtain Calls. I'm Matt Austin.
And I am Beth Young. And for the next half an hour, we are fortunate to have in our midst Daniel C. Levine, the artistic director of ACT of CT, and Andrew Palermo, the creator and director of their immediately upcoming production of Nickel Mines. Thank you for coming. It's great to have you here.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us.
Totally our pleasure. We love having you here. Nickel Mines is a musical that is probably not in everyone's orbit. They haven't, but this is an opportunity, and you have taken this on, and you have developed this very original and really very moving production. And I'd like, Daniel, if you could start to talk about how this came to be for ACT. How did you hear of Nickel Mines, and how did you come to produce it?
So I was essentially, what your audience might not know is that Nickel Mines was the production back in March 2020 that we were just in our final days of rehearsal, in tech rehearsal before opening, that we had to close the theater down due to COVID. So it was actually meant to be back then, and we never got to do it. And but I'm so in love with this piece, and I feel as though it is just such an important story and a way to tell a story that I was really passionate about bringing it back this year. But basically, Erin Craig, who is the producing director at ACT of Connecticut, had told me a couple of years ago about this piece that Andrew and his partners, who he'll talk about in a little bit, were developing this piece called Nickel Mines. And then pretty soon after that, remember we did Austin's Pride at ACT. Andrew was the choreographer of the production of Austin's Pride at ACT of Connecticut. So while I knew Andrew, from New York social circles and being on Broadway and all of that, we never got to collaborate together and talk about projects, really. So it was really great having him as part of Austin's Pride at the theater. And we started talking about his project, Nickel Mines, that Erin had told me about a little bit before. And I thought maybe this is going to be something that would be great for our New Works program. The season was already planned back for 2019, 2020. But when I read the script and listened to the music and watched some of the footage from the Nymph production, it was in a festival in New York. It was also developed at UC Irvine, where Andrew's on faculty there. And I was just so moved, and we'll talk about sort of the messages of the show in a minute, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So I was determined to put it as part of the 2019-20 season, but it was an add-on. It wasn't part of the main stage season, because we already had announced the season, and there were already season packages purchased. So it was basically like an add-on that people could buy tickets to if they wanted to. It was sort of meant to be sort of black boxy and not a lot of production elements, I would say, because we really just wanted to stay true to the storytelling, and that's what we wanted to really focus on for our New Works programs, shows. It's really about helping creative teams like Andrew and his partners to develop and to move the thing forward, so that at some point it could have a fully realized production. Like I said, that got canceled. But because of my persistence, and also a wonderful, wonderful woman in Ridgefield named Anita D'Onofrio, who is passionate about gun reform, and she's just a wonderful advocate for many fantastic issues, including gun reform, and loves ACT of Connecticut. She also felt passionate enough to give a large amount of money for us to be able to bring it back. And so what I wanted to do this time, though, is to have it as part of our main stage season, and as opposed to just, an add-on. I wanted it to actually be one of the 4 productions that we were actually doing this year. Smokey Joe's, as you guys saw, Nickel Mines, Jesus Christ Superstar, and then we will close the season with Rent. So that's how it all, that's how it got to me, and that's how I decided to produce it for ACT.
And so you just mentioned gun reform, and we haven't talked about what the show is about. So Andrew, what it is a musical, and tell us, but it's more than that, right? I've been watching some clips, and it looks phenomenal. Tell us a little bit about the show and how you came up with it, and
Where it came from and all
where it
that.
came
Yeah.
from. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Dan mentioned, I'm a professor in the drama department at UC Irvine after I stopped performing and, doing the freelance directing and choreographing in the city for many years. That opportunity came up, moved out there, started, doing the teaching thing while, flying across the country to still work in the city and do, starting to choreograph Broadway shows and off-Broadway shows and whatnot. And one of the beautiful things about academia is that you have built-in labor. You don't have to, pay for what you normally would have to do if you're out in the real world, as we say. So I, what happened was I was, watching CNN, and it was 2013 at the time, so I'd only been at UCI for a year, and I saw this story about nickel mines. The happening is the Amish call the event that this whole story is sort of based around. And my first reaction in seeing this story, I think it was Anderson Cooper, was, oh yeah, oh I remember that. Now this is only the shooting that I'll talk about in a second happened in 2006. So this was only 7 years later, and that just struck me right away of I should remember this very clearly, and we should remember every school shooting or mass shooting or tragic event like that very clearly. So the fact that I didn't, I mean, I remembered it, but it had sort of like, just fizzled away from my memory. That was interesting to me right away. Um, and then as the story went on, the thing that really struck me and that made me want to tell the story is so I'll tell you exactly what happened. Sorry, I'm jumping cart before the horse. So in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in nickel mines, and West Nickel Mines was the school. There's an Amish community, a large Amish community there, that a non-Amish, the Amish call us English, went into their one-room schoolhouse on October 2nd, 2006, took 10 girls hostage, shot 10, all of them, killed himself. 5 of them died, 5 of them survived. Um, the thing that is really truly breathtaking about this story and what happened almost immediately thereafter was that the Amish community publicly forgave the killer and went so far as to they comforted him and his family, excuse me, even maybe more so than they would each other. They went to such lengths to show we are capable of handling this, and forgiveness is how we work, basically. So there's all kinds of sort of versions of that bit of the story in our story, from the shooter's mother coming to one of the victims to help her rehab. She's a quadriplegic, and she, sort of started helping take care of her, and the shooter's family going to the funerals of the girls who died, and it just the community, what happened to the community was just remarkable, and I think continues to be remarkable. And so that alone made me be like, wow, this is something that is pretty breathtaking. And then add on top of that, from a kind of theatrical and dramatic perspective, that I'm really fascinated with cultures in general, but especially cultures that sort of are microcosms within a larger, so that's the Amish basically, right? They live amongst us, but we don't really know what the deal is. We know, they don't have electricity, and they have horse and buggies and dress in all black. That's about all most people know. So that the culture itself, their faith, how it differs a little bit from maybe traditional, Protestantism or Presbyterianism or whatever, is interesting. And then their traditions and how that could be portrayed in sort of theatrical ways. All of those things coming together sort of made me think, oh, this would be an interesting thing to theatricalize in a potentially interpretive way. So I brought on my co-creator, Shannon Stokey, as my co-author. We wrote the book together, and a guy named Dan Dyer, who is a singer-songwriter from Texas, is the composer lyricist. So I basically came up with a story. Shannon and I then created, an outline and characters, the majority of whom are real? Are the actual people who were involved in this, the families, the casualties, the shooter's family, a couple of fictional characters to help us tell aspects of the story that we kind of needed to highlight. Um, and then we endeavored to create a um, sort of a prism of what this, it's called The Happening, that's what the Amish call this shooting, what it did like after that moment. So coming at it from the family of the shooter, coming at it from the families of the victims, coming at it from our own perspective, outsiders, and what how we might react through the eyes of different people, characters in the show. So that's where it all sort of how it all came together. We did a developmental production at my school, UCI, in 2014. As Dan said, we did a production at the New York Musical Festival in 2016, and then I was here at ACT for Austin's Pride in 2019. As Dan said, as soon as I stepped foot in the theater, I thought Nickel Mines because it's just a great, it's a really, it's kind of a perfect space for our show. It's an intimate show. Um, I think the New York Times, when they reviewed our production for the festivals, called it a chamber musical, and I think that's kind of appropriate. We don't have big pyrotechnics and things like that. It's pretty bare bones in a lot of ways because we just want to focus on the story. So ACT's venue, which is a beautiful theater, but it is intimate, felt really appropriate. And then the fact that the proximity to Newtown is just, that's a whole other ball of wax that, um, the gun violence aspect of this show is not something that we don't sort of preach for or against. We don't take a strong stance in the show, but there's no way to not talk about it. It's a huge part of the conversation. So that's these talkbacks that Dan was talking about. I mean, that will be a huge part of what we talk about, and that's great. I mean, me personally, I have my own views, and I'm pretty strong gun sense advocate for new gun legislation. And Anita D'Onofrio, who Dan mentioned, is just a rock star to me and all that she's done to sort of move the needle and all this stuff. But again, we're not preaching Second Amendment or anything like that. It's just a part of our story.
Yeah, I think your story is incredibly timely, actually. I mean,
Unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately, but fortunately, because the forgiveness is so powerful. I mean, that's, to me, that is the story, really,
Right.
is the aftermath. And I think that there couldn't be a better time in American history for that to be something that people can absorb. And that seems really powerful. I had a question for you about the research of this. And did you spend time in the community with members of the community? And they were
We did not.
okay.
We intentionally did not dive into the community because we wanted to maintain a little bit of distance from it because we're doing an interpretation. If we were doing like a bio musical where we were
Right.
trying to say this is exactly what happened, then we would go in. But because there's an interpretation to it, like a lot of historical movies and plays, based on real events is kind of more where we are. So in some ways, we didn't want to be too influenced by individual people and personalities and all that stuff. So that being said, we ingested everything else that we could, every article, interview and transcripts of 911 calls from the day, and you name it. I mean, we learned as much as we could. Um, One interesting anecdote, should I tell this story, Dan, about the brother? So when we were doing the show at the festival in New York, I got a message on Facebook Messenger. We had already opened. We were only running for a couple weeks, and it was the shooter's brother saying, my mom, who's a major character in the show, uh, told me that y'all are doing a show about this, and I'd love to come see it." And I like threw my phone across the room because I was terrified at first because I didn't know what that would mean. But reached out to my partners and said, well, get him a ticket, if he wants to come. So he did, and he was so gracious, so wonderful. His mom, again, who is a big character in the show, who wrote a book about the happening, sent a copy with him, signed for us, and he thanked us and said, we because we don't we try not to vilify this person and his family any more than it just naturally is. There's no way that you can't get around that. But we try to say, like, look, no one can understand, but we can have compassion for the people around his family and his kids and his wife and his coworkers and the person at 7-Eleven that he got his coffee from. So because of that, the shooter's brother was really gracious, and that really meant a lot to us. So yeah, it's interesting. We had a little bit of pushback from a few people in Lancaster. I did a story on the Lancaster like ABC affiliate, and that is natural. That's just going to happen. That they weren't quite sure because they hadn't seen the show, of course, so they were worried that we're glorifying it or making money off of it. And I said, I'm actually spending a lot of money on it myself. So, and that's great. I mean, we do these kinds of pieces to have conversations. To me, I love, everybody loves doing Hello Dolly and Grease and the fun shows and all that stuff. It's great, but my heart is in this kind of work that hopefully makes us talk.
Right, right.
And that's a good segue, talking. Dan, can you tell us about these talkbacks that you have planned that Andrew was talking about?
Yes, totally. I want to say though that
oh yeah,
no, I just want to say that I don't want the audience, your viewers, to think, oh, a musical about a shooting, and it is, you do not see a shooting happen on stage. You do not hear gunshots. You do not. It is. What I love about this piece is that, as Andrew said, it's interpretive, right? And a lot of it is told through beautiful movement and dance. And so it's sometimes I watch, rehearsals, and I'm like, oh, it's like watching a ballet in a sense, right? And with like this gorgeous sort of staging and being able to watch a show through that lens with such heavy subject matter and material and content. It changes something a little bit, right? I mean, Anita says that we hear about shootings in the news all the time, and we read about it in the paper all the time, but we don't see it danced about or sung about or acted about on stage. You know what I mean? So it's just another way to sort of tell these stories. And I just don't want viewers to think like, what? How violent, how gruesome. That is not the show. It really is about, yes, it's about this event, but it's about what happened after this, how a community supports one another, and how we get past these things, and the power of forgiveness, and all of that. The question, what community talkbacks? Yeah. Yes. So I thought that it would be important to, because it is heavy material, and because of our proximity to Newtown, and just because my audience is, we haven't done anything like this at ACT before. And so I think, and because it was originally supposed to be part of sort of like the New Works program, I think it's important to be able to talk about these things and to like process these things if people want to, and to find out about the creation of these things, right? So we're offering 3 community talkbacks, free of charge. People that are in, that have come to the show that night will just stay afterward. We're filming these, and then we're going to release them to like libraries and schools and as educational tools. But essentially, we're going to have 3 different panels of experts joining me and Andrew, talking about, well, first of all, Andrew talking about the creation of the thing, like we just talked about with you guys. But then we're going to have like Jeremy Stein, for example, who's the executive director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence, is going to be one of our guests. Carol Malstead, who is the executive director of Compassionate Ridgefield, and a therapist, is going to be a part of the panel to talk sort of about the compassionate side of the story and empathy and all of that. Nero Felciano, who's a wonderful author and personality and therapist, will be at one of them to, again, just to sort of, the show is going to spark these conversations, and we don't want it to end at the bows. We want to continue the conversations, because that's really the point, right? That's the point of doing these things. So that's what Andrew just said. Also, I think it is important as ACT is a relatively new theater. We're we're in mid-4th season now, right? And we missed a whole season because of COVID. But I think it's important. Yes, I want to do Mamma Mia's. Yes, I want to do Little Shop of Horrors and Jesus Christ Superstars and all the and Rent. But I also think that it is really important to also to do new shows to aid in the development of these new shows and to introduce audiences to these, to witnessing these things, not only so the creative team can understand what's working on stage and what might not be working on stage, but also so that the audience can sort of take ownership. I saw that show at ACT when it was, the first professional production of the thing. I got to see that at ACT. Or, my God, I never thought that I would think this way about a show. And I'm not a real dance person, but that was, wow, I never thought about it through that. You know what I mean? I just think that it's really, really important that audiences be exposed to this kind of thing, which is why I wanted it as part of our main stage season, so that people with season tickets that want to see Jesus Christ Superstar, Smokey Joe's Cafe, and Rent also have to see Nickel Mines. So
Tricky.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that rest of that season. As you said, Jesus Christ Superstar after Nickel Mines. Nickel Mines runs, give us the dates just for folks.
Yeah, January 20th to January 30th. I should also say that it has been quite challenging producing theater during COVID. Especially during this uptick of
Gosh,
it's been really, really
like
challenging.
guerrilla warfare.
I can imagine.
But that's so Nickel Mines it's a short run, January 20th to 30th. Jesus Christ Superstar will be March 24th to April 17th. That will be ACT's biggest production to date, with 32 people on stage, 11 musicians, 32 actors. It's going to be our biggest show to date, and I'm really excited about that because I've been a part of a lot of Jesus Christ Superstar productions, including the 2000 Tony nominated Broadway revival, of which I was an actor in that one, but I've directed it, in other theaters around the country. And this is sort of the version that I've always wanted to do, in a sense. And so I'm really, really excited. And Caitlin Kinnunen, who was nominated for a Tony for The Prom, is starring as Mary. We've got this incredible, incredible cast. So I'm excited for Jesus Christ Superstar. And then we will finish this season with Rent, which is May 26th to June 19th. So Nickel Mines, Superstar, and then closing it out with Rent. We also will do another Broadway Unplugged in April sometime. I think, Matt, you came to the last one, didn't you?
I did, the Heidi Blickenstaff. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. So Nickel Mines runs from the 20th to the 30th. Something is happening on the 31st, I think. Dan, right? Is it the Grammys?
Oh. Yes. Grammys.
I'm good at transition, right?
Happening on the 31st. What did I forget in my calendar? Are the COVID rules changing again with equity? Yes, the Grammy Awards are on January 31st. Thank you. ACT, me, Brian Perry, and Stephen Schwartz were nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Cast Album for this year, which is amazing. For Snapshots, the movie that we made back in last February and March. Snapshots was supposed to be part of our main stage season. Because of COVID, we didn't do it. So I had the idea to make a movie of it, which has now been purchased by Broadway HD. So it's on demand on Broadway HD for 7 years. So if you want to go to Broadway HD, you can see it. But the cast album of that, the soundtrack of that film that I made was nominated for a Grammy Award.
That's awesome.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's wonderful.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's unexpected and terrific to be nominated. I think I'm nominated again with Andrew Lloyd Webber, I think, is in there. And
Cinderella, right? Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. So January 31st. Yep.
Nice.
Well, you deserve it, because I recall that being quite an undertaking in and of itself. There are a lot of detail and a lot of effort went into putting that together, and that was a brilliant cast also. I mean, they were just wonderful.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, that was I never expected something so wonderful to come out of the COVID year, and that was really one wonderful thing that came out of it. So
Right.
That's great.
Well, as we wrap up, Andrew, you're working on Nickel Mines. Is what's up ahead for you?
Well, it's, because of the pandemic, I think all of us are sort of just getting our motors going
Yeah.
again. Everything got so dormant for so long. So, I'll be going back to California, back to my teaching classes and doing shows in school and all that. My co-author Shannon, who I mentioned before, we've got a few things kind of in the early stages of percolation, and it's I've also done a couple other readings of new shows recently as a director, not things that I wrote. That you never know when they're going to come. We were supposed to be touring. I choreographed a show called Midnight at the Never Get, which was in the same nymph season as Nickel Mines actually, and it's supposed to be on tour right now. But because of the pandemic and how backed up everything got, it's a little shelved. So we just keep chugging along and wait until the world sort of calms down and people can sort of, I think, unabashedly say like, okay, we're doing this. We know that we're in the clear.
Yeah, slowly but surely we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, things are opening and people are going to the shows, and we'll be back. We'll all be back.
Oh, yeah.
I know it. I'm telling you right now, I know it.
You're right. Yes.
It will happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here. So again, that's Nickel Mines runs January 20th. This will probably go up tomorrow. So this weekend, and it runs a full 10 days or that's 10 days. Yep. I'm good at math.
You're showing off.
ACT, the website for tickets.
ACTofCT.org. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been just an absolute pleasure. Really nice to meet you, Andrew. I can't wait to see the show. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks for having us.
You.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you after, I hope.
Awesome. I hope so. It's a pleasure.
And thank you to our viewers for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.